Okay, so we have 15 online and 2 in the class. So if you have questions online, please pipe up so we can all learn from everybody on this. I'm going to share the screen on Zoom.
I didn't get that email you're talking about from Russ.
Okay. You didn't get the first one?
I didn't get either of them.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have it up on the main screen so you can read it from there, but you can pull them up on the dot loop if you have it, because I don't have access to his email to send it out.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so and then just real quick online, if you put your name in there, so we have it if you haven't got that already, and then we'll get started. Okay. All right. Okay, so we're going through the seller's packet today, and the seller's packet, I'm actually just going to talk to you guys, and you guys can take a listen because it's easier that way. But the seller's packet is all of the forms that we need to make sure it goes smoothly. And the interesting thing is, and you're going to see this, as Century 21, we come into these forms and our legal department actually rewrites a lot of them. And so some of the forms are easier to get from the MLS, but I would caution you not to get it from the MLS because they're different. There's different things in there. The MLS is very generic. It protects the seller at a high level, which is a good thing, but there's some things in there that don't protect us as agents as much. And so we've gone back into our contracts and they've rewritten these so that there's some more protection in us. And I'm going to point out a few differences. I'm not going to point out all the differences because we've done a lot of different things on it, but I'm going to point out some of the differences. So if you look at this packet that I gave you or that's on your online, it's a pretty extensive thing. We're going to spend like probably 70% of our time today on the exclusive right to sell. And then some of the other forms will kind of breeze through a little bit faster because they're not that hard to understand. It's more of just filling in blanks. And so we're going to kind of breeze through those. So we're going to actually talk more about the exclusive right to sell because that's the one that's protecting us and the one that we can screw up the fastest. Okay. So if you take out the exclusive right to sell, we're just going to start going through this from the top. And then if you're online, if you have questions, I'm not looking at the chat box the whole time. So just pipe up and ask a question and we can go from there. So if you look at the very start, it says this agreement is entered in effective date, and then there's a date that fills in there. That date is the date you want your listing to be active. Okay. So one of the biggest mistakes that we make is we write that date as today's date because that's the day that we want to we're having them sign the contract. The difference here is on the regular MLS form, that date is the contract date. And so you're going to trigger that. You need to get it on the MLS within 24 hours if you sign that date as today. So the way that we got around this, and I'll show you where it's written in our contract, that the effective date is different than the signing date. It can be the same. So if you want it to go, you want the listing to be live today, you could put today's date. But what I would suggest is whatever date you want that to, whether you're going to put it on the MLS, that's the date you're going to put there as the effective date. Okay. So then they'll sign something different there. So that can be a future date. We don't want to be too far because obviously you want to get it on the market. And then that's between Century 21, the company, and the seller's agent. That would be you. So that first blank there, so you're going to do the date in those first dates. That's the date you want it to be active. Then the next blank is going to be you as the agent. So this is a big key. This is one that we get mixed up a lot on.
I was gonna say, because I would think that it would be the seller's name.
Well, because it says seller
says
right
the
there, and
seller.
then in the line below it says.
Oh yeah,
seller's
I'm skipping
agent.
it. Good call. Good catch. Sorry about that. Okay. In the first blank, we're talking about the sellers themselves, their name. The second blank is where I skipped down to. I missed the blank. Okay, so you're right.
Seller's agent. Oh,
Seller's
okay.
So we
agent.
would put like the date between Century 21, the company, and Joe and Julie Smith.
Yeah.
And then the next line is us.
Yeah,
Be
and then it goes in
the
the terms of listing. The seller hereby grants the company, including the agent, and that's where your name goes in. So the biggest thing with this one, and the one that we get a lot of mistakes with, is as an agent, we don't own the listings. We are the representative of the company. So when we go out and we take a listing and we think, okay, this is my listing, it's really under the principal broker's name. It's under them, and then we're working under them. So we are just assigned including, but the company actually owns the listing, and that's how it is. That's how it's run throughout the state. Okay. Authorizes the agent. And then this next date, this is where it's talking about when the contract ends. So when is a good time frame for the contract to be? What's the time frame? What should we put as a listing time frame?
6 months.
6 months. Okay. Why 6 months?
It gives you time for market fluctuations, variations, things like that. If you can't sell property in 6 months, you've overpriced it, you've done some things. I don't know other reasons though.
Yeah, no, that's a great reason. It gives us enough time to get the property sold. And in this market, it's a little bit different. I mean, obviously you're selling homes quicker. If your home is on the market for 6 months in this market, you've really priced it wrong. But no, 6 months is a good time frame. But I want you to think about this in a way that you have to look at the time frame that you're signing it. If you sign a 6 month agreement in October, when does that agreement end?
We would start November, wouldn't you?
April.
April.
I don't know.
Okay. So the challenge here is if I did a 6 month listing, and I had this experience with an agent once where in the winter things slow down for this particular neighborhood. And in the spring, it picked right back up. And they signed a 6 month agreement. And at the end of the 6 months, we were coming into March. And March, as we know, is starting to be spring. Homes started to go up, or people started coming out again. Okay. This market's a little different than this, but I want you to think about it because when the market starts to adjust back, these are things you have to think about. He had 2 more weeks left on his contract before it expired. And all of a sudden things started to happen in the neighborhood. And you could see showing starting to come. This particular agent actually went to the seller and said, look, if you can give me just 2 more weeks, we'll have your home sold, because nothing happened in this whole entire neighborhood. It's actually a big neighborhood. It was up in Sandy, Pepperwood neighborhood. So a fairly nice established neighborhood up there, and nothing in the entire neighborhood sold all winter. Nothing did. And come spring, all of a sudden, all these people started coming through. And it was evident that something was going to happen in the next couple of weeks. And the seller came back and said, no, we gave you 6 months. You weren't able to sell it. So we're going to switch to another agent and see if they can do that. Well, sure enough, the next agent took it, had it under contract in 5 days and sold it. And that seller thinks, oh, well, that guy was no good. He wasn't there. But in reality, what happened was we were watching the market and nothing sold. It wasn't just that agent. It was every agent in that community did not sell a home that winter. And then when the spring hit, they ended up selling 6 homes in that neighborhood in March, April, and May of that year. And so it was something we have to think about is, yes, we talk about, yes, we only need a 6 month listing, but there's certain properties or certain circumstances where a 6 month listing is not enough. If you're doing some land, if you're doing a recreational property.
Like a cabin.
Yeah, if you're doing a
have
cabin.
Prospect where 6 months, you probably won't sell it.
Got it. Yeah. So you have to think about that. I mean, especially where you get a cabin property and now all of a sudden you're listing it right now, that gives you maybe 2 months before they close the gates and nobody can even go up to the land.
Get up there, yeah.
Yeah. So just look at that. I mean, we don't want you to go less than, a 3 month listing on it, but you have to be, I mean, this is something we give you guys all authority to choose on what you do. remember, as a listing agent, when is the money spent? When do you as a listing agent spend the money?
At the beginning.
At the beginning, right?
Marketing.
So I'm going to spend all of my time. I'm going to spend my money on my sign. I'm going to spend my money putting the sign up, my key box, putting all the
Open
marketing,
house.
open house, all of the money that I'm spending, if I'm going to spend on my listing, is going to be within the first couple of weeks. After that, we're getting momentum from that time. So if I shortchange myself on the time frame, what happens is I spend the money, I lose the listing, I don't get refunded. And that's something we want to look at. The next line, we're talking about the property. You want to make sure that you have the right property address in there. This one you'll get flagged by our compliance department if you don't have, the zip codes and stuff like that that's in there, just because we want to make sure it's very specific on where it is. And then this part right here, right underneath that, the property, it says at the listing price and term stated on the attached property multiple listing service MLS data input form. Okay, this is where we're starting to incorporate the MLS input form into our contract. And so a lot of times we think, okay, we have the exclusive right to sell, but I haven't got the listing input form signed yet, so I have a valid listing. The challenge is when it actually brings it into the contract, we have to have that too. So that needs to be the full package, and we're gonna talk about the listing input as we go through it a little bit more. And then this is a new section that's not in this section is not in your regular MLS exclusive right to sell. It says right here under that section, it says if the property goes under contract during the listing period, the expiration date of this contract will automatically extend to the closing date of the purchase contract. If the purchase involves both lot and new construction build, this agreement will cover both lot and build. So this is a big thing for us that the regular exclusive right to sell doesn't have. This one will extend, so you don't have to go back in and extend your contract if it's the listing is going to, let's say the listing is going to expire the end of July and our contracts got pushed out another week or 2 weeks. Okay, this allows this contract to keep going, so we don't actually have to go in and have them sign and say extend my contract for that.
Nice.
Okay, so that's a really big change and a good one. And this lot and new construction, because sometimes they're separated and we'd have to do 2 different exclusive right to sells. This brings them back together so that we only have to do one. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay. The one thing to note on this though, this one's a big thing in the MLS. When you put your listing in, it's going to have an expiration date on it. Just because this extends doesn't mean that date is going to be changed, which means if I'm under contract with somebody and the MLS switches to expired, your seller could get a lot of expired calls that day because it expires. So just go into the MLS and switch the date based off of that.
Oh, okay.
Okay, any questions on that first part? Okay. Okay, we're going to go into the brokerage fee. Okay, the brokerage fee is the commission. This is why we do what we do. This is us getting paid. This is the section that tells us how we get paid. In your contract there, so right in the middle, it's gonna give us a price. The seller agrees to pay the company and brokerage fee in the amount of 6% plus $295 of the acquisition price. Okay, so the biggest difference here is on the MLS, that number between the two, 6%, it's 6% or a main number. Okay.
What's this one that says 7% plus $495?
Okay, so that was the one I want to throw away. So that's the top. So
I'm just gonna get rid of it. Right?
yeah, the problem is the other one, the third
they're
page
back
is,
to back.
that's why I didn't
Okay.
throw it away.
I'll just.
So
exit
that-
out.
Just get rid of this, but keep this one.
That's the new one.
Yes.
This one's the new one.
Yeah, the new one I gave you. So the new one that Russ sent out today, you should have the new one. If you're still looking at, yes, the one he sent out a couple days ago, it will say 7% and 495. That actually is the old one that we've used. And that's one thing I want you to keep in mind is that we change these all the time. So if you just get set on using just one of them, like keep updating it so that we're using the new one every time, because we change it specifically. When we change contracts, it's the same as we change them in the state. The reason we change them is because a problem came up and we want to figure out a way to not have that problem
Not have
again.
a problem.
That's really the bottom line, is
Yeah,
we
that
don't
makes
want to have that problem. So if you use the regular one and you put 6% or 295, you're going to have a problem when it comes down to it. You could make $295 or $495.
And your marketing is way more than that.
Yeah, so you don't want to do that. So this one says plus. So let's talk a little bit about this $295 transaction fee and the number there. In fact, I'm going to show you something. Let me see if I don't know if you guys online can see this very well. I'm going to draw it kind of big, but there is this curve that holds everybody in. There's a 20% here and 20% here and a 60% here. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that online. I tried to write it big. Okay, so there's a small number here, a small number here, and a big number here. And what this is the mentality of what people think. Okay, in society, we all fall into one of these three categories. This bottom 20% right here, I will call the cheap people. Okay, their mindset is always, how do I get it the cheapest? How do I spend less money? A good example would be they go to the store and they need to get Tylenol or some medicine. Okay, but instead of buying Tylenol, they get the generic brand because it's cheaper. Okay, it's this mindset. They're the ones that are always asking for discounts. They're the ones that are going to fight you on your commission because it's just not worth it. They don't want to pay that much. And that's a mindset. They're saying it's not worth it, I'm not going to do it. And they always will go to that thought, that process. Then you have this top 20% here. And I'm going to call these guys the spenders. These guys, when they see a high price, they equate that with value. So, oh, it's more expensive. That means it's probably nicer. So I'm going to get the more expensive one. They won't even look at the generic brand at the store because, well, they don't know what the generic brand means. So why bother with that? I'll pay the extra money here. I'm not going to drive across town to save 5 cents on gas because this is closer. Where this group of people will drive across town, spend the 5 cents to get that 5 cents off. Yeah, it's like Costco gas. It's cheaper. But if you have to drive 15 miles to get to your Costco and 15 miles back, it's not cheaper. And that's the difference between these two. So 20% of the population thinks this is what I want and I'm going to get it. It doesn't matter if value's there. 20% says I'm going to find the cheapest thing regardless of what we're doing. The 60%, they're looking for value versus price. Okay, they're looking at the value of what they're doing. Okay, so if you look at the contract right here, some contracts have 7%, $495. Some have 6%, $295. The reason for that, when you put it in here, one is when it's actually typed in and not written, people are less likely to question it. And who would rather make? Would we rather make 7% or 6%? 7, right? Easy, right? We'd rather make 6 than 5. That's the difference. So when you have a number that's typed in there and it's not written in there, there's some people who are not going to question it. So if you put a 7% in there and they come in there and go 7%, why is it 7%? I thought it was less than that. It says no, it's because of the value that I bring that I charge 7%. This group of people are going to say, oh, that makes sense. Sure. And they sign the contract. Okay. This group of people, They say, absolutely not, please don't come over, kind of a mentality, right? And then this one is looking for that value. So if you can present the value on why that 6% is important, or the 6 or 7% is important, these people will sign too. So you have to decide, do I want to hang out with these people, or do I want to hang out with these people?
Like the others.
Right. And the only way we do this is we get confident in ourselves that what we charge, we're worth that. And the biggest thing is, this is different for everybody that I talk to. It comes down to their personal belief on the value they bring. And it's hard for new agents to really grasp this because they don't associate everything they've done in their life is why they can do their job at a high level. They're just saying, oh, I've been in real estate for a month. I've been in real estate for 6 months or however long. 5% is good because I've been in there. I haven't been that valuable. The reality is when we associate everything I've done in my life up to right now is helping you get the best deal possible. Therefore, I'm worth whatever I decided I'm going to charge at that point. Okay, so it comes down to a personal belief of what I can charge. If you find that you keep discounting that number, I want you to reevaluate your belief system about what that number means. Because I know lots of people who will only charge 7%. I know lots of people that charge 6%. And I know some people who feel uncomfortable charging any more than 5%. Just because of the mindset and the way that they think and the way they brought up. And it's not a bad thing. It's just if we can understand that people think differently and all we have to do is ask and see what happens, then it gives us an opportunity. Okay, so that's where the 6%. So now let's talk a little bit about this 295 fee. Okay, so what is, if we look at this 295 fee, what is it exact? Like, what really is it?
Well, isn't it the people behind the scenes doing all the office?
Okay.
Transactions, papers, printers.
Okay.
The
Overhead.
storage fee for the documents.
The storage fee for the documents, right? Okay. So every one of those can be right, because those are all things that we have to pay in our transaction. But if you really look at what this fee is, the reason we have this fee is mainly because in Utah, we have really high splits for our agents and really low caps. Some states in California, they don't even have a cap. So the company does not make a lot of money. When we think they make a lot of money, this is where they have to make their money. So but here's the thing that's funny. You're not going to tell your clients that. You're not going to say, well, yeah, I'm going to charge you $295 or $495 because I make too much money from the split, so my company needs to make money. We're not going to say that, right? I hope you don't say that.
Yeah.
But what I want you to think about this is these are some of those hard costs that you are incurring when you're doing a transaction. So let me ask you this question, because usually we get a pushback from lenders. Lenders are usually the ones that come back and say, why are you charging them? You're already making 3% or your commission on. Why are you charging another fee on top of that? What's the deal with that? And it always comes down to everything that we said. Okay, covers all of those different things. You can name whatever you want it to cover. It does cover those because we have to cover those. But would a lender ever pay for a buyer's appraisal?
No,
Why?
they just think that that's a cost that the buyer has to make, and
It's part of the
it's part
transaction.
of the deal.
It's another professional service
Yeah,
added to the transaction that they are passing on to the buyer because the
Right.
buyer is using that, right?
right.
Okay, would you ever pay for an inspection for your buyer? Now, granted, there's times where you
Maybe,
might do that, but let's just say in a general sense, is it the expectation of a buyer that you pay for their inspection?
No, I don't think the expectation's there.
No, right? So that's another service that they chose to have into their transaction that it's costing,
They're
right?
willing to pay.
They're willing to pay. Okay, so when I look at this 295 fee, I look at it and I can name a whole bunch of things that this covers. We've talked about the transaction coordinators. We talked about the compliance. I mean, just having somebody look over our files to protect them. those guys have got to get paid. The dot loop,
The gal taking the earnest money.
taking the earnest money. I mean, you can name all of those. I can tell you that if you add up all of what they make, the 295 it would cost a lot more if you got that. Okay, so you can add all of those together, but the reality is it's another professional service that's not benefiting you as an agent. So the appraisal and the inspection benefit the buyer, and this professional service benefits the buyer, not necessarily the agent. So when we try to connect those two things and say, I'm charging a commission and I'm going to charge you this over here, I want you to separate that mentally, that this is paying for a professional service and it's a requirement from the company. So regardless of whether the buyer pays it or you choose to pay it, it's required. Okay, so then the next thing is the commission. The commission's where you're splitting it with the brokerage, you're splitting it with Uncle Sam for taxes, and then you get to take home some. That's what this is
For
about.
all your work.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess, would it be appropriate to say, 295, you don't, as an agent, you don't get any of that?
You don't get any of that because
Would that be good to let your client know, hey,
Yeah.
I don't get a dime of this.
yeah, well, the reality is you don't get a dime of it. In fact, if you don't collect it, we're going to take it from from your commission.
My commission,
So-
yeah.
So it's not a matter of I don't have to, you don't have to pay this. If you don't pay this, somebody else pays it.
It's gonna be paid.
Right. So for me, there's a couple ways to look at it. One is I either have my buyers pay it, or I ask the sellers to pay it, or I pay it. Those are my three choices, because the company is not going to come back and say, yeah, no, not a problem. We're not
Which
gonna
if you have
pay
a
it.
really good deal, a good commission, like you're doing a $1 million+ home, might be smart to say, look, I'll cover
Okay, so
the 295.
So it's a great point you bring up. I would challenge you on that's a mindset, because does it matter what the value is? Does the lender ever say, I'll pay for your appraisal for the
no.
professional services? Okay, so
Yeah,
is it something that we can cover? Absolutely. Is it a mindset? That's where it is. It's a mindset. I'm saying that this is worth it to me. I'm going to pay this. Okay. Has there ever been a time where I've paid my 295 or 495? Yes, absolutely. I have. In fact, when I've worked out with my commissions and a seller says, I think you should give us a discount, we're going to drop the commission, to 5%. I say, well, I can't drop from 6 to 5. We'll keep it at 5, but tell you what, I'll cover the 495 or 295 fee. And you can decide what that fee is. It's written in here as 295. Look, we charge 295 as a company, but there's other expenses. You can look into that. So for me, if I take a listing, I actually charge 495 for a listing.
You do.
And for a buyer, I charge 195 for a listing, or 295 now. But that's because I look at it differently. On a listing, remember, I'm spending money up front, and so they're recouping some of that cost. I mean, I'm buying a sign, I'm buying
Right.
I'm all of these things, and we can look at it as, well, that's what the commission covers, and that's what society looks at. Well, not all of society. This group doesn't always look at it that way. They just want to see what the value is. This group is going to look at it and say, well, you're just nickel and diming me. You're trying to get every
Yeah.
penny out of me you can. Well,
And I'm not gonna pay it.
yeah.
I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay. Any questions on that? Anyone online have a question on that?
Yeah, Jason, can you hear me?
Yep.
So if Century 21 charges $295, but if you put $495 in that slot, do they still keep the $295 and the residual comes to the agent?
Yes. Yeah. Great question. So the company is only taking the 295. So like, for example, let's say you hire the TC to help you out in your transaction, and you add that TC fee to this number. So you charge $495 or $595 to cover that. That just will cover that expense as well. So whatever is above the 295 will go back to the agent in any manner that you want it to be. So yes,
Oh, okay.
company doesn't take more than the 295, and they don't take less than 295. They only take
It's
295. Yes, as of right now. Okay, good question though. Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna bring back up the contract for you guys. Okay, so on this brokerage thing, here's something that we've got to keep a look at. Look down right in the middle. It says the brokerage fee, unless otherwise agreed upon in writing by the seller and the company, shall be due and payable from the seller's proceeds on these three conditions. One, if a purchase price and the date of the recording of the closing documents for the acquisition of the property. So basically, once it records on the property, that commission is due. Number two, if a lease, the effective date of the lease. So some of us don't realize that we can get paid on the lease side of it. We can get paid on a lease option side of it. If a seller says, we're not going to sell it now, we're going to rent it out, this still has an effect to that, okay? The commission's different, obviously, because it would be based off of the lease, not necessarily the sales price, but you can get paid on the lease and the effective date of the
Would it be
lease.
the same percent, like the 6%?
It would still be the
one
same as what
that
you put on
is-
there. Yeah.
So it would be like 6% of whatever they decide to rent for.
Yeah,
For the whole, probably the term of the lease?
for the term of the lease.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that one, when
Is
you
that
do,
only if you bring the renter?
well, not necessarily. It doesn't say that they bring it or not. In fact, it says in here whether it's brought by the seller, by the agent, or by any other means.
Okay.
This is a contract that we have with them. So you just have to keep that in mind, that just because it doesn't close doesn't necessarily mean you don't get paid. And then option C, it says if the option date agreement is signed. And so this is one where a lot of agents think that if I sign a lease option, and these aren't as a big of a deal right now, but as the market shifts, you'll probably see these lease options come back available. But a lot of times agents are like, well, I signed the lease option and it's good for a year, so I'm going to get paid in a year. Well, technically, based off of this, it's saying they're going to pay us when that thing is agreed and signed. It's not when it's,
And the effective date.
yeah. So when they close on the lease option, we should be getting paid on that. And I've seen it both ways. We just have to understand that based on the contract, you could get paid right up front on that. Okay. And then on the bottom, this is new to this contract. So if you look at the first page of the one that I had you rip off, or the one that Russ sent out, this was not in there. But just the last three lines, it just says the company shall offer a buyer's agent commission, BAC, on the MLS of dollar amount or percentage of the acquisition price. This amount may be modified only with written consent of the seller. Brokerage fees are not set by any board or association of realtors or MLS or any manner other than between the company and the seller. Okay, so that line that's in bold right there, remember how I said we put things in our contract because of lawsuits and problems we've had? So
Yeah.
about 2 years ago, I think it's been 2 years, it might not have been 2 years ago, but 2 years ago, we had a huge lawsuit brought up against the NAR, where for subway owners and some brokerages that were charging low fees were saying that we are price fixing our market. We are telling sellers that you have to sign 6%. 6% is our standard. Okay. The challenge is we can have a company standard that we keep everybody to, but as an industry, there is not a standard. We're not out there saying you have to charge 5%, you have to charge 6%. We've got accustomed to saying that 6% is the standard for the industry, and 3% goes to the buyer and 3% goes to the seller. The problem is that's not regulated. And when we say that, that was the lawsuits, they're saying we are price fixing the real estate market. And this is stating that we are not, it's not set. We haven't done any agreement to that. So that can help us if we ever got into that
Okay.
problem again. Okay, we've started putting the MLS here, and then you can see right under that, you can see seller's initials. We want the sellers to initial this. This came because of probably nobody in this office, I'm pretty sure of it, but it came because what was happening is agents were taking 6%, 7% listings and offering 1.5% to 2% BAC and taking 4 to 5% on the selling side.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so, and the seller had no idea. They just figured out they were just splitting it and it wasn't a big deal. Okay, can you do that? Can I offer a lower commission than I get on the MLS?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, yes, you can. You
Yeah,
don't, this is,
yeah.
remember this part right here, it is not set. So you can decide what you want to do, but as a company, we want to make sure that that's disclosed to the seller. So they can't come back to us and say, why did you only offer, you know, because if you look at the industry as a whole and what we're doing to ourselves, this is something we're doing to ourselves and it's really unfortunate, but we are slowly devaluing our own services. At one point, it was a very, you know, agents would not show a home unless it was at a certain percentage. And then that percentage has moved down. And now it's moving down even further, and it's moving down even further. Eventually, it's going to get to the point where that not standard, that's just kind of a looks like a standard, is going to be a really low percentage because we're now accepting lower amounts on the commission. So as a seller, if you're taking a listing, I would suggest not undercutting our industry by offering really low buyer's commissions, because it's eventually going to not be worth it for a buyer's agent. In fact, I was talking to, this is a little while ago up in the Seattle area. They did this big promotion that they didn't need buyer's agents. And eventually the buyer's agents, they started taking 4% listings, and they were doing 3% to the listing agent and 1% to the buyer's agent. Then it didn't make no sense to be a buyer's agent. So now they've just eliminated it, and they say on their MLS, if you have a buyer's agent, you pay them yourself.
Oh.
And that's where it's at. So I just want us as an industry to think about this, what we're doing to ourselves, because as we start taking less commission, which I personally believe it's belief in yourself and the value you bring. When we take less commission and then we offer less commission on the buying side, because I mean, you're not giving yourself less than the buyer's agent and you're taking less, and all of a sudden you get to the point where nobody's making any money and our industry suffers for that. So just be really cautious with what you're doing there. But we as a company want you to disclose that to your seller so that, you know, if you're going to make 4% on the listing and give a 2% buyer's commission, it's not, I mean, it's not illegal. You can do that. We just want you to disclose that to your seller so they're okay with that as well in this market. Okay. Any questions on the brokerage fee, that whole section?
I just feel like this whole value discussion is tricky with the flat fee brokerages. Because so many people are fighting the industry value. Like
Yeah.
Homey, for example, saying
Mhm.
you're charging too much, and they're trying to change the way real estate works now. And so we have to fight against that.
Yeah, we have to fight against, the biggest thing is with discounted brokerages, they will always exist. And in a market that's a really good market, they exist and they start to grow. But when the market shifts, the value starts to come back.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing for us is we have to establish the value right now in ourselves so that when the market does shift, we are the ones that survive for that. And the value is a mindset thing. Like, is there ever a time in this market that we're going to take a less commission? Before it was a hard no. Like as a company, we'd say, look, if you're not putting 7% on your listing and minimum 6%, I don't want you taking the listing. Well, in this market, we have to reevaluate some of the things we're doing. My biggest thing is if you're reevaluating what you're doing, just don't reevaluate what you're spending for the buyer's agent. And that's if you're going to take a 4% listing, you know, maybe you are paying 2.5% to the buyer's agent or 3%, and you're taking less than that if that's what you're doing. Most agents aren't doing that. So on the discounted brokerage side of it, we have to create value above and beyond what they're giving. And if we are the same, okay, if I sit in front of a seller and I have the exact same thing as a discounted brokerage, I'm going to do the same things, I'm going to act the same way, and I'm going to get you the same results. There's only two things that's going to decide if they choose me. Okay, one is going to be the price we set on their home. Because if I say I can sell it for $500,000 and they say they can sell it for $550,000, that's going to separate us. And they say, well, that person thinks they can do it for $50,000 more. and you're doing the exact same things, I'm going to try that one. So that's one separation. The number two separation is what we charge. What we charge is going to be a huge separation. So in one sense, you might be charged $2,000 flat fee, and in another sense, you're going to be charged 3%. So as an agent, I need to figure out, how do I bring that 3% value to the client so that they want to use me instead of them? So the question is, so I've used this example quite a bit, and I think it's a really simple one. But if you look at, if I had a $50 bill, okay, and you had a $20 bill, I will trade my $50 bill for your $20 bill. Would you do that?
Yeah,
Why?
because it's $30 more.
30 bucks more,
Nothing.
okay? So let me ask you this question. How often would you do that?
Every hour.
Every time I was offered.
Every time I gave it to you, I
Every
offered
time
it,
I
right?
say, thanks.
Right, okay? So
Yeah.
here's the thing. A discounted broker is saying, I'm gonna give you $22 for your $20. Okay, and you're looking at saying, yeah, I do that every time too. We have to show them the $30 difference. Why I'm gonna give you $50 and you're gonna take the 20. That's the difference. From their perspective, if we do the exact same thing, two extra dollars versus 30 extra dollars is still more money than I started with. I'll go with either one. We have to establish what that is. And if we come back to it, and I'm sitting in front of you two, and I'm giving you, you've given me your business plan and what you're going to do to sell your home, and you're going to charge me 6%, and you're going to charge me a flat fee. And I look at it and I go, you guys are the same. You're doing the exact same thing. Who am I choosing?
Probably me, because flat fee.
Flat fee, because you're doing the exact same thing. But if she's saying, this is what I'm doing, and you're not doing those things, and I can see that it's going to be more beneficial for me, and I'm going to make more money, or I'm going to have a
Maybe
better
sell my house
experience,
quicker.
maybe quicker.
And
Yeah.
it's-
Yeah, so lots of different things. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm scared to like be in a listing presentation, right? and,
Yeah.
You know, have this discussion and try to convince somebody why, because I feel like there could be that pushback of like, why would I not go with a flat free brokerage? How do you
Mhm.
convince someone? How do you show them that
Yeah.
value?
So first of all, we never convince people. We just show them the difference and help them understand it. Okay, they're going to have to convince themselves. You'll never be able to just push a value on somebody. You have to be able to have them see the value you bring. And there's lots of different strategies to do that, but that's something that I would specifically work on is, and somebody says this to me, what are my responses? And come up with 2 or 3, good responses. Remember though, okay,
yeah, the
This-
cheap ones. are not
the
gonna
cheap
convince.
people, the 20% is, it doesn't matter what you say, they're still gonna go with it.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. And really, the 20% up on the top, they're not having that conversation with you because they probably didn't interview the flat fee because they just said their service is not as what I want to have.
Probably
right?
did their homework prior to when you came.
I would say this high spender group probably did no homework. They probably just said, oh, Century
It's a
20,
person- Yeah.
Century
the
21,
name.
I know them.
Okay.
They work really hard in real estate. They sell lots of real estate. I want to
Okay.
interview a Century
She
21.
seems nice enough, so yeah.
Yeah.
We'll go with her.
Yeah, so that's where that is. So yeah, it's creating value, and as the market shifts, the value is going to be there. We see people all the time that they use a flat fee brokerage and it didn't work out the way they wanted to. And the problem is, in a really hot market, it works out for most people. And so
that does work out.
so when that changes, then people will still be coming back for those that know what they're doing. And our job right now is to figure that out, figure out how to be that agent for them. Okay. Okay. Number 3, protection period. Okay. If it within blank months, how many months should we put in there?
3 maybe?
Okay. 3 to 6. Okay. So first, let's talk about what this is. Okay. a protection period is the time. So if I have a listing and during the listing, somebody comes to my house, they look at the house, then they leave, and then the listing expires or they cancel the listing, and then they come back and they say, hey, we just went to that house last week. We still like to buy it. Then they want to buy it. We still can get paid on that. That's what that protection period is. Okay. It's in here for a couple reasons. One is because that legitimately could end a contract and do that, but it's also to keep the seller more honest with us too. And I'll give you an example. I actually happen to represent the buyers on this one, but it was from the sellers that did this. So what happened was I went and showed my buyers this home. They really liked it. We put in an offer on it. They rejected the offer because it was too low for what they wanted to accept. Well, then they found a way. I think in today's day and age, you can Google people and figure out how to get a hold of them. They got a hold of my clients. The seller got a hold of my clients and said, if you cancel your contract with your agent and bring us the same offer you had before, so we don't have to pay your agent any commission, we will accept your offer at that offer.
Wow,
Okay. So we all know that
that happens.
that it does happen. Here's the cool part about it was my clients called me,
That's awesome.
and that was cool because out of all the ones that don't call, you know, there are a few really do call, and they said, hey, this is what's happening. And we ended up not buying the home. Actually, I think, yeah, we ended up not buying that home. We went somewhere else, but it does happen. And the reality is when somebody can see if they can save some money, it does happen more frequently. And when the listing's about ready to expire, that's where the seller says, if I can wait 1 week or one, you know, just a little bit, then I won't have to pay you anymore. And I can save that money. And that's the thing that we're trying to get away from on this protection period.
So essentially, the sellers are trying to then do it as like a for sale by owner.
Yeah, they would just sell it on their own and not have a commission involved at all. Is basically.
How does it work if they sign with a new agent though? Does that automatically terminate yours, or is it dependent on how it's worded?
Okay, so that's a good question. So in our contract, we have it where we could go after that commission. However, it's a really sticky situation going after a double commission. So one for you and one for them. So the regular exclusive right to sell from the MLS, that terminates that protection period. So whether you put 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and they relist it with somebody else and sell it, that you're not getting a commission on that. Our contract does have that in there. If you look down here at the bottom of that section, any extension of the listing period, the seller agrees to pay the company brokerage fee stated in section 2. So we have that in there, but as a company, don't expect us to go after that one. That's a really hard battle to fight because the reality is there's so many things that they could say, this is the reason they came back. And so it would be really hard to defend it. So that's the thing with this protection period. For me, I usually only put 1 or 2 months in there because for me, once you get past 2 months, you know, they're doing something else. But the 1 month I for sure do because I've seen that happen in my own transactions. But getting it up to 3 to 6 months, you know, to me, you have to keep tabs on it that whole time.
Say, how do you know? You'd have to check and see if the home.
Well, not only you have to check and see if it's closing, but you have to make sure you know who the buyer is and that you have proof that you showed the buyer. So once you get past a month or 2 months, it's going to be a hard battle to fight. But so I wouldn't count on that on the does another listing cancel it, because the normal exclusive right to sell does cancel it. Ours does not cancel it. But as a company, remember the company is going to own the listing. I mean, if it's blatant and we know that they were purposely doing it, we will go after that. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm gonna take that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, we're gonna move up to sellers warranties. We're only on 4 and we're almost an hour in the class, and so don't panic because the first part of this is more in depth than the rest of it. So we'll fly through a lot of it a lot quicker. But I really want you to understand this part, because these are the parts that get people frustrated. Okay, so seller warranties, number 4. Seller warrants the company and the individuals are or entity listed above as the seller represents all the recorded owners. Okay, so this is really a big key, because we have people that sign listing agreements and they say that they're the only owners and they're really not. So this, they're saying to us that they're warranting that they are. So we need to make sure that they're the only ones, they're the ones on title so they can sign it. If I have 2 people on title and one person signs it, do I have a valid listing contract?
No.
No. Okay, I need to have both of them sign it. Now, if it's in a trust, what do I need to do if it's in a trust?
Get all the people on the trust to be
To
all
have
sign.
authorization.
Yeah, you've got to get the trust papers so you can see who has authorization to sign, because in a trust, it might be one person authorized to sign, but it could also be multiple people,
Yeah.
4 or 5 people. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's see. The seller acknowledges that they have entered into an exclusive right to sell listing agreement with Century 21 Everest, and this agreement may have an effective date later than the date of the seller signed this agreement. So this goes back to what we first talked about when we were at the very start, the effective date. This is the difference between our contract and the regular contract. The effective date can be different. Okay. Okay, so this is where it states that it could be a different date from there. In the event the effective date of the ERS is later than the date of this ERS was signed, the seller agrees they will not enter into another ERS agreement with any other brokerage. If the seller does enter into another agreement, this ERS shall govern. Okay,
Oh, okay.
so that's where it's stating that if I don't have it on the MLS, but I have an effective date of, let's say, August 1st, and I don't do anything until August 1st on that, but they sign another listing agreement in between there,
In between.
this is still going to govern. They're still under listing with us. So this is very different than the one on the MLS, because the MLS one, your effective date is right when you sign it. And then if you post date it, let's say that I put the date on August 1st and I'm using the other form. Well, it doesn't take effect until the other form or until August 1st. So really, I don't have a contract until that date. Where this one, I have a contract in hand. So I think that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
And then it goes through some of the other things that they're warranting. We won't go read through it all, but on the very last 2 lines, it says seller will be required to notify the listing agent and the company in writing of any defects in the property known to the seller that materially affect the value of the property. If this notification is not provided in writing to the listing agent or the company, it's as if notification did not occur at all. Okay, so we added this because of, remember, we always add things because of a problem. This was a problem that came up where there was a defect on a property, was not put in the seller's disclosures. The agent didn't know much about it. The buyer came back and said, you knew about it. And the seller said, well, I told the agent about it. And if they tell you about it, now all of a sudden, now you're liable for it too. Okay, because we didn't disclose it. What we're saying here is that seller needs to give us something in writing that says this is a defect on our property. Otherwise, they didn't tell us what they're doing. Does that make sense? Okay.
Because
So-
the seller is usually right in an argument like that if you can't prove it, right, to the agent.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing with problems in a transaction. Doesn't matter whether it's buyer or with a seller. Okay. You can be the best agent out there. And if there's a problem, somebody needs to be blamed. The seller is not going to say, it's my fault.
Yeah.
I know I'm the one complaining, but it's my fault and I'm going to keep complaining. It's not going to be that. It's all of a sudden going to be flipped on something else. As a broker in the company, I get calls from clients all the time about the agents, and that always will give me the same story. agent's not doing anything. They're not communicating with me. They're not doing a good job. They're not doing anything that I'm asking them to do. That's what they're saying. So I want out of the contract. So I always just take that, okay, I take the information down and say, okay, I'm going to talk to my agent before we, figure out what's going on. I'm sorry you're having that experience. Then I hang up and I call my agent and I call you guys. What do you think the story is that you're saying?
Okay, so he said, she said.
Yeah.
right? And the owner isn't giving me
The
the
owner isn't
information, or they're
giving
not
me-
letting people in their home, or they're not.
Yeah. So we had one that came up a little while ago where the agent or the client was trying to get out of the contract and they said, we haven't communicated, we haven't done anything. And they just went through this whole spell. And then I talked to the agent and the agent sent me pages and pages of text messages going back and forth for the last 2 weeks. Come to find out, the seller wanted to get out of the contract so they could.
So they thought that the agent would have record or
They just,
back it up.
yeah, they're just
You would
looking
just
for.
go, okay.
They're looking for a reason to get out of the contract. And the best reason to get out is my agent's not doing their job. Well, when the agent is doing their job and we have record that they're doing their job, then it's not a he said, she said type of conversation. It is really, okay, I can see what was going on. The story is different. You're making something up. And I can tell you that every time somebody wants out of a contract, it's always comes back to the agent is blank, 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 blank. That's what it is. And so as an agent, to protect you guys, the more you can have in writing, the more things you can put in dot loop, the more things you can just keep track of. Like, your text message threads and your email threads. And, when you have a verbal conversation with your client, at the end of the conversation, just say, hey, I'm going to put what we just talked about in an email. I'm going to send it to you. Just respond that this is what we talked about. It says 2 things to your client. One is what you said is important. So I'm going to write it down and make sure I didn't miss anything. And 2, now we have documentation of what we actually talked about. And then we can move forward. That's the biggest thing with some of these things. Okay. So we just want everything in writing. It doesn't count if it's not in writing. And we know that from real estate school. If you don't have a contract until it's in writing.
Yeah.
So I would say the same thing with your client. And it's not a matter of like, I don't trust you. It's just good business practices to say, let's just make sure we're documenting everything. And the interesting thing is when they know that you're doing that, they don't have problems with it because 1, if there is a problem, they'll respond to your email and say, no, that's not what I said. This is what I said. And then you get it cleared up. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, agency relationships. This one's pretty self-explanatory on here. Anybody online have questions about the section 4 seller's warranties?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So duties of the relation, we'll just talk real quick about this. This is the limited section. As a selling agent, can we represent the buyer in the transaction?
Yeah.
Yes, we can. The only time we can't is if we are the principal in the transaction, which means we own the property. If we are an ownership in the property,
Okay.
even if it's an LLC, you cannot have limited relationship in that scenario. Another.
What if the seller is a relative?
Is a relative.
Yeah.
So in that particular case, this is just, you can, but my suggestion to you is don't. I would not do that because we had a scenario just last week where, in fact, it's an agent in my office in Orem right now. He's representing his parents signing a property and a client came in and wants them to represent him. It's a really sticky situation. That's where you could really, like most lawsuits with problems in a transaction are because of limited agency. You didn't represent me. You said something you shouldn't, there's a lot of problems with that. So I would highly suggest not. There's another way that I would suggest doing yours. If you're the listing agent and somebody comes in and they're not represented, my suggestion is just continue to have them not represent themselves. Have them sign the form that says non-representative, and you can still fill out the contracts for your client. You just ask them, what do you want me to put in here? You can still do that. The difference is you don't take on the liability of that client. You don't take on the responsibility for them making dumb decisions or doing what they want. You still focus on your client and you can still make the full commission that you're charging on your listing as a listing agent. And that's one thing that, we sometimes forget in our listing contract, that 6% or 7% or whatever we charge in that's an agreement for you to get paid. You decide what you want to pay the other agent. I look at it as like a marketing fee. Me as an agent, I'm going to sell your property. It's going to cost you 6% or 7%. I'm going to charge you that. What I choose to do on this side to get your property sold is my choice, but you're agreeing to this. So whether I bring a buyer and I pay that agent's, or another buyer comes with an agent, I pay that agent to bring me them, or if no agent's involved, I still make that 6%. Does that make sense? Okay, so we don't have to discount it just because they're not being represented. That's actually a big misconception
I
with.
was gonna say, I don't think I thought about that. So you don't have to, they're not represented. You keep the whole
Yeah, you can keep the whole thing.
thing.
In fact, I wouldn't recommend this, but technically, if the buyer's agent is not a part of the board of realtors, they're not part of the board because you have to be part of the board if you're with Century 21, but you can be unaffiliated with a board and there is no agreement in place that says they get paid. So the MLS is the agreement that we give to other agents.
I see.
But if they are not part of that and they come in, technically you don't have to pay them that because there's no agreement. I mean, I've always paid them when they've come in
Yeah,
because
it's the right thing to do.
it's the right thing to do. But I'm just saying,
You don't.
if we have to look at that 6% as this is what I'm charging to sell your home.
We control it.
We control that. Okay. Okay. Any questions on agency relationships? Okay. Let's go down to professional advice. And the things that are bolded are the things that we want to just bring to attention. And this is mainly to protect us as agents and just let the seller know. And we bolded it because, like I said, problems come up. So we have to make sure that they get bolded.
And this is what's different from the MLS.
This is different from the MLS. It says, seller is advised not to rely on the company or any agents of the company for a determination regarding the physical or legal condition of the property. And we jump down to the other bolded point. The company strongly recommends that the seller obtain such independent advice. If the seller fails to do so, the seller is acting contrary to the advice of the company. So this is tax matters, zoning, building codes, any of this stuff that the seller can do. We want them to feel comfortable with it. They don't have to rely on us. We have them sign our buyers sign the due diligence checklist and stuff. The seller, they're agreeing right here that, look, I don't know what your tax problems are going to be. So you can go talk to your tax person. And if you don't talk to them, that's not what I suggest, because I suggest you go talk to them.
Yeah.
And that's basically what it's saying. Okay. The other thing is, don't give them that advice. Like it's saying, I'm not going to give you that advice. My suggestion is don't give them that advice. If they're asking for tax advice, I would direct them to a CPA or a tax advisor for those specific reasons. We get in trouble when we start making assumptions about certain things. Like there was a lawsuit in the California company. This is a couple years ago. Buyer comes in to the house. There's this interesting, weird smell. And they asked the agent, they said, what's that smell? And the agent said, it's the sea, it's the ocean. That's just what it smells like sometimes. And come to find out, it was a huge
class.
It was this huge sewage issue.
It's 10 o'clock here, right?
Put yourself on mute if you're on if you're chatting. Thank you. Okay, so the agent said it's a big sewage problem, and then come to find out, the buyer moves in, or not a sewage problem. It's a sea comes in. Buyer finds out it's a sewage problem. That agent now is roped into the a lawsuit because of the professional advice of this is the C, not something we should look at. Okay, so my suggestion is, if you don't know, don't say. If you don't know, don't assume. And even if you do know,
Maybe
and
if
it's
you
not
do
in your
know,
scope of real
You
estate,
should say.
point them in the right direction.
Is this where you would or wouldn't recommend a specific person? Like, would you say, just contact a tax attorney and leave it at that? Or do you say, contact this guy, or this guy, and give them options?
Yeah, you can definitely contact or give them suggestions. I mean, I wouldn't just leave them high and dry and just say, hey, I don't know anything about it, so good luck. I
Yeah.
mean, I think you can be, I mean, that's where our service comes in, is we can point them in the right direction. But, you know, it even got to the point where, and I don't think they're really emphasizing this as much, but when I first was in real estate, they would say, don't bring a tape measure to, you know, your inspections, because if the client uses your tape measure and it isn't right, you're now liable. So, you know, silly things like that, we look at them like, oh, come on, you're really gonna do that? That's really what happened. That's why they bring it up, because somebody was measuring a fridge, got the wrong measurements, bought a
Oh, so it was your
$3,200
tape
fridge.
measure.
Yep.
It's your fault.
Everyone looks for somebody else's fault. Okay, so number 7, disputes. Basically, we're gonna go to mediation first as a company, and then we'll pursue something else. Everyone else covers their expenses. Number 8, I think we're number 8, attorney fees. The biggest thing.
9.
No, it's 8, you're right.
Oh, the one online, let's see, did I get the wrong one online?
Yeah,
Just a minute.
yeah, you're right.
If you're following along on the one that he sent you, that's the right one. The one that was on the shared is the wrong one. Let me find that one.
It's all cool.
Okay. Let me just see if we can get the right one for you. The wrong one too. Well, I'm gonna pull up this other one and then I'll just tell you online where the difference ones is. This is the only form that's the different one, but it's, let's see. Dispute, let's see where we got mixed up. 6,
Expiration
5,
is
oh,
the problem.
okay. Yeah.
Expiration was
Expiration date of contract
6.
will automatically extend. Okay, so online, if you're looking at the one on the Zoom one, number 6, the expiration, we already went through that one. That one's up higher. Remember, if the contract extends, then we're covered. That was the old one. So the new one is now just written in the upper category. Okay, so attorney, prevailing party shall be entitled to receiving from the other party all related costs of the attorney. So if we had to go to that extent of getting an attorney involved, the losing party is the one that's covering those expenses. The biggest thing is anytime you're in a lawsuit, it's no good for anybody. I mean, it just takes it just takes a really long time. So we try to avoid that as much as possible, which is why we keep revising these exclusive right to sells. Okay, let's go to the next one, advertising seller's authority, authorization. Okay. This is also where it says that this is what they give us authorization to do. So the first one, disclosing the MLS after closing. So keep in mind that Utah is a non-disclosed state, so we don't have to disclose, but it helps our industry as we disclose what's selling, because that's what gives us our comps and gives us everything that we need. So this gives us authorization to disclose that. The next one is the MLS square footage. So the seller is required to disclose their square footage in multiple areas. This is one of the areas they disclose to us. The other one is on the seller's disclosures. that's where they disclose what their square footage is. If they have questions on where it is, we can help them find it on the county records. If they have an appraisal, that's a great place to do it. Building plans. So we just want something that's a legal document or something that's an official document to say that. We don't want them to say, well, the tax records say it's a 3,200 square foot home, but I've added this huge addition and now it's, 3,800 square feet. And so advertise it as 3,800 square feet when the taxes say 3,200 and you have no evidence of it. And they say, well, I can measure it. So you can explain seller measured this. But if there's not an official one, don't claim that this is an official one for it.
So if I'm getting it off of old MLS listing and I check other and then I put MLS number and I cite that, is that fine? Or really not?
I wouldn't suggest that.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so he's asking if you go to the old MLS and you look at the old MLS number and say, oh, this is the square footage, so that's where I found it. It's not really I would suggest finding it another way. But if that's all you've got, then yeah, you can cite that. I mean, like a condo, there's some condos I've looked at tax records and they don't have anything, like they don't have it all broken up into what it is and they're all the exact same. And for those, you might look at an old MLS
Yeah,
for that.
some condos don't even list on tax title.
Yep. Just disclose where you got it from. I mean, that's the thing with the MLS is just because I put it on the MLS doesn't necessarily mean it's all accurate. Not. That's why for your buyers, that's what due diligence is about. It's not just take the MLS as this is what they said, go and figure it out for your client. Go have them measure it, not you measure it. Financial information from your lenders, that gives you permission to do that. Keys for the property, if applicable. So you need the keys. Have the MLS or local board put a key box on your doors. This gives you a right to put the key box on there. If you choose to not use a non-MLS key box, this is the one that protects us here. Seller acknowledges that it may not provide the same level of security as the MLS or local board or realtors approved security box. So that puts more liability on us as agents, just that discloses that. Next one's open houses, gives you a right to do that. Put a for sale sign on the property, order preliminary title, home warranty. And let's see, I think this one ends right here. Oh no, hold up now. Okay, and so let's see. Oh no, they got all good. Okay, deposit. So this number K, deposit in an interest-bearing account. We don't do that. This gives us a right to do that, but we don't. So our account is not interest-bearing for that. And then number L and M. Those are new to ours, not on the MLS. It says seller agree. So these are really good ones for us right now. When the property is pending or under contract, seller instructs seller's agent to not present any additional offers unless an offer is designated as a backup offer. So basically what it's saying is we have the right. So in our normal MLS, we don't have the right. When we get an offer, we have to submit the offer. We have to do that. So this gives us the right to say, I've got an accepted offer. We'll hold your offer. I'm not submitting it to my seller. The advantage to that is once you have an accepted offer, can they accept another offer in a primary position? No. Okay, so I accept it. I work really hard to get my seller to accept an offer, and then somebody comes in with a ridiculously high offer.
Yeah.
And they want me to present it to my client. So my client's like, oh, well, maybe I should have gone with that one. No, you didn't do your job. And the reality is they got a great offer. They're moving forward. This one won't pay that anyway. They want the appraisal to bring it down. They're just trying to get in there and create doubt with your client.
Yeah.
And that creates more problems. So this gives us the right to be like, yeah, I've got the offer. Thank you. And we don't necessarily need to submit all of them. If you're not under contract, I would submit all of them so they could see, but this gives you that right. And then number M, in the event the buyer's agent requests to present an offer in person to the seller gives written authorization to the brokerage to decide if the offer will be presented in person or not. So this is more popular earlier when, technology wasn't available, but the normal exclusive right to sell doesn't give you this. You can go and present your offers in person to the seller. This gives us the right to say, no, we don't want that. Okay. If you don't have this in there, then they need to let you come in and present your offer to them. Okay. Any questions about the advertising seller's authorizations? Okay. Personal. Yeah.
Can you put the contract back on the screen, please?
Oh, is it not on the screen? Good call.
So back on M, this is saying if the buyer's agent is saying, I want to sit down with your client to present my offer versus them giving the offer to me and me giving that to the client.
Yeah. So in the other contract, if I wanted to, can you see that online now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. If I wanted to present my offer to the seller directly, I would call up the agent and say, I'd like to present my offer. And then they would have to set up a meeting where I could go out and I could sit down with the seller and say, this is my offer. This is what we're offering. This is what we're presenting, and actually present it to the seller.
Without you as the agent.
No, the agent can be
The
there.
agent could be.
The seller's agent, I would
Be there.
suggest be there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't let my, if they were coming to present to my client, I would be there. I would not,
Yeah.
I would not be there. But
Right.
having them come in and actually do that, that used to be more common than it is now, but this gives us the right to say yes or no to that. I mean, you have to decide the reality is what they're trying to do in that scenario is, I want to come in and I want to present to you and see where we can make this work. And I want you to feel good about my clients. And Russ tells a story about how he'd have his buyers in the car and they would wait in the car and he'd go in and present to the seller, and then he'd walk out and he'd go present to the buyers, and he'd walk back in and present to the sellers so they could get some kind of agreement so they could actually get it closed. So you have to decide if that's a smart move for you in your business and whether you want to allow that. This gives us permission to say, no, we're not going to do that. Versus the other one, you don't really have that. If they want to present it, you need to present all offers. And if presenting all offers means you show up at my seller's house with me to present it, then that's what that means. Okay. Personal property. This is a big deal. We've added things like prescription drugs and valuables in the property. Seller agrees to hold the company harmless for any loss of damage that might result from the showings of inspections completed on behalf of the potential buyer or from any authorizations given in section 9. So if something happens to the transaction while they're there, this will protect us. Had an agent in our office here. He represented the seller, and while a buyer's was coming in, allegedly the buyer's agent kicked the seller's dog, and the seller had to put their dog down that week. That was the story that was brought to us. I talked to the agent afterwards, and that was a different story from the buyer's perspective, but it protected us in this section because we represented the seller. Personally, I had seen the dog, and I don't think that dog was kicked. I think the dog was just very old.
Sick and was
So
gonna be put
they wanted something from the buyer's agent, and the reality is people look for all kinds of excuses to make it that. So that's why that's in there, so that we're protected. I do suggest that you read that through with your client and just suggest to them, look, this is what we're doing. Okay. Next one, attachments, property condition disclosure and wire fraud. That says right here that it's attached. Foreign investment, this is the FIRFTA one. This is if they're a foreign, person, they don't have to necessarily file taxes with the US. So that's why they have to make it known here so that those taxes can be withheld. This is one that we miss a lot as agents when we're having them sign it. We forget to have them cross that box out. And trust me, compliance will make you go back and redo it if you miss that box. And that's always a weird one to go back and say, I need to redo this because I missed a checkbox. Okay, equal housing opportunity. The best thing to do is present offers as the numbers and not the people. We're in a habit right now as agents. We like to send in what we call the love letters or the sympathy letters to help me choose me. Okay, if I was representing a seller and I was looking at all of those, I wouldn't necessarily submit those to my client. I would submit all the numbers. And once they've chosen, maybe I'll pull that letter out and say, this is the one that you've chosen, or maybe not even do that. Because the reality is if they make a decision based on any of the protected classes, and that's their decision, and a buyer doesn't get it because of that decision, and we have no proof that says that they chose based off of any of those protected classes, that's a huge issue, an equal housing opportunity. So to protect your seller, I leave names, I leave everything off of it. I just make a spreadsheet that says, this is the offer, this is the conditions, this is when it's going to close. What one works best for you? And then they choose, and then you can decide whether you want to, disclose everything else to them as fine. But it's just something we have to be very cautious with. And unfortunately, some people are basing their decision off of those. And as an agent, we cannot be part of that. We have to be neutral. We have to be away from that. And if they're making their decision based on that, then you really need to pull back and have this discussion because it's not right. Okay.
Can we switch the contract to page 3, please, on the screen? Thank you.
I lost connection right at the very first part of the accepting letters. You're saying don't present the letters or not present letters?
Personally, I don't think you should submit the letters. I'm talking specifically about the seller's agent and reviewing offers.
Right.
Okay, now it's not a hard and fast rule. You can do whatever you want. I'm just suggesting that the letters create an opportunity for them to decide based off of things in the letter. We don't control if the letter states things like there's a family, there's a religion, there's a
right.
We don't have that control of what the buyer is sending. Now, the buyer's agent shouldn't be sending letters that have that in there anyway, but we can't control that. So when it comes to me as a listing agent, to protect my seller, I would suggest only going through the numbers. And
right, got it.
Yeah, that's what I'd suggest. Make sense?
Yeah, I've seen a listing that actually said no love letters, please.
Well, from a buyer's perspective, they're looking at it and saying, if I can connect with them, they'll choose my offer. And there is some truth to that, if they feel connected, because I know a lot of people that are like, I just want this person in my home. I feel good about this person in my home. The problem is we don't go down that path. Okay.
Right.
Okay, perfect.
Get it. I get it.
Okay. Other than that, that's everything on the exclusive right to sell. Any questions about the exclusive right to sell before we go through the other ones real quick? Okay, so we're going to go into the Mls Input Form. Okay, there's not a lot on here that we're going to have to go through, so we can kind of fly through this one pretty quick. But what I want to do, if you can mute online, if you're unless you want to say something, I can hear lots of background music. Okay, perfect. Thanks. Okay, so the residential listing input form. You can find this on .loop and you can find this on the MLS. They're the same forms. So there's we haven't gone in and changed the listing input form. So for me personally, I fill it out on the MLS because it's a lot easier. I can go in and do it all in there and save it and fix it from there. But you can also pull it on dot loop. Either way is fine. The biggest thing is if they have a star next to them, that's a required item in order for us to put it on the MLS. So not everything is required. The more information you put on the MLS input form, the better, because it gives the prospective buyers a really good idea of what they're going into. So you have to do the starred ones. You don't have to do everything. So that's a big key. If you kind of go through this form a little bit, I'm just going to kind of scroll through it because there's not, I mean, it's all pretty much information from the seller. I would have the sellers fill out as much as possible. Unless you know what they are, then you can fill it out. I usually fill out the basics and then take it to the seller. Let's see. Let's go to this one. This is one where I see a lot of people mess up. Okay, so right here where you see the breakdown of what the house looks like. So this is what these categories mean. If you look in approximate square footage, okay, so main level, basement, that's pretty self-explanatory. You kind of know where that is. The bedrooms with the master in the not parentheses, but the whatever you call those.
That was
Parentheses. So you put that in there, whatever floor that is, you check that box. That's what that box is there for. So you're going to write a number in there. So let's just say there's 3 bedrooms on level 2 and there's a master bedroom on level 1. On level 2, you're going to write 3, and then level 1, you're going to do 1, and then you're going to check that box because that's where the main bedroom is. Bathrooms, you have F, which is a full bathroom that consists of a tub and a shower. 3/4 bath is no tub, it does have a shower, and a half bath, which is the H, is just a toilet. Toilet and sink. Yeah. Okay. Family room, den, formal living room. Those are, I think we kind of understand those. The kitchen and dining room. So K is for kitchen. B is for breakfast bar. So if there's a bar, you're gonna sit up at it. That's what that one is. F is for fine dining room. And or not fine dining, formal, sorry, fine, it's fine too. That's where they put the fine dishes. Formal. Yeah, fine and formal.
Where you eat your Thanksgiving meal.
Yeah, that's where you pull out the fancy dishes and it's in another room that usually is just full of stuff. It's not usually there. And then the S is semi-formal, which would be like the kitchen table is still in the kitchen. Really.
Okay, so B is breakfast bar, not breakfast nook. Because sometimes you'll see like it has a breakfast nook, they'll call it, and that's where like the table is. But that's the semi-formal.
Yeah. Okay, then laundry room, fireplace. Okay. Let's skip down to the listing information section. It's on number 3. Page 3, I mean. Okay, a couple things to note on here. If you look at the listing type, EAL and ERS, as a company, we only do the ERS. So that's exclusive right to sell. I think the EAS, I'm not really sure. I think it means exclusive agent listing. I think it's just for that one agent. But we don't do that. So always click ERS. 2 lines down from that, the dual rate. Does anybody know what dual rate means? Okay, dual rate. So if I take a listing, I've agreed with my seller that if I bring the buyer, I'm going to charge less commission. That's the agreement. So let's say I charge a 6% commission, but if I personally bring the buyer, I've agreed with my seller that I'll only take 5% commission. Okay, so there's that agreement in place beforehand. That's what the dual rate is. It's basically saying that the listing agent will take a different commission if they bring their own buyer. So it's a good thing to know, because if you see on the listing, you see that there is a dual rate it might be a good question you could ask as a buyer's agent. You can just ask the seller, is any of these offers represented by you? Because if they are, you could already have a disadvantage because they've agreed to drop some of their commission on that. Compensation. Yep.
Also, that would also establish limited agency at that time too, right?
Correct. Yep. So that's just pre-negotiated with the seller that they're going to drop that if they have to do a limited agency on that transaction. So typically I would suggest saying no on that one. The next one, compensation offered, BAC, gross and net. So gross is the full price. You're taking a commission off the full price. The net would be what's the seller's netting. So if they're paying any closing costs to the buyer, we are minusing that out of the commission for your total. So like what typically happens is we'll close on a transaction. We'll think it's on gross. Let's say we're making, it was a $400,000 listing. We're making 3%. So we got $12,000, but then we pay $10,000 back and we wonder why our commission's like 11,950 or something. Like, why are we losing another $60? It's because it's a net listing. So just know that that's where that number comes from. It comes from the seller. So if there's no closing costs and there's no expenses outside that, then it's just the listing price. Okay. Listing agent information. You can have a co-agent if you want. Their information will be on there. Okay, and then we have all of these check boxes. The biggest thing with the check boxes is just talk with your client on what they want to include and exclude. So on the right side, you see the inclusions and exclusions. The biggest thing with inclusions and exclusions, if somebody wants something out, like let's say they want, so I've seen this before where there's a chandelier that's like a family heirloom, okay, and they put it in their house and they say, we're going to sell the home, but we are not selling it with the chandelier. We're taking the chandelier with us. Okay. My suggestion, if you're taking that listing, is have them replace the chandelier before they list the home. Because when somebody says, think about it with kids. If you say you can't do something, what do they want to do? They want to do it. They want it, right? So anytime I exclude something from the buyer's perspective, they're going to want it. And they're going to put an offer that says, I want this house, I'll pay this price, but you have to include the chandelier if you do that. And now we're going to cause problems. So anything that they're specific that they really, really, really want, and we can get out of the house right away, like get it out of the house, get it gone. You know, we want to take our stove with us. Okay, well, replace the stove right now with what you're going to use, then take your stove. That solves so many problems before it gets there. And it's just a conversation you have. I would definitely have this conversation with them. So I usually will give this to my client to fill out. They'll fill it out, then I'll go through. And this is a section I will really ask them questions on, especially if they have things like washers, dryers, hot tubs, those kind of things, because we need to know, are we including it or are we excluding it? Okay. And then the last thing on this input is the very last page. If you go to these remarks, let's just go through these remarks really quick. Okay, so the first one is the remarks. Okay, this is the public remarks. This is what everybody sees when they pull up your listing. So this is not just the agents. This is if in any MLS, the buyers are going to see these remarks. They're going to see what you're saying here. So this is the one where you want to make sure that you're not writing things you shouldn't be writing in there. You should be just giving details of the property. Typically, how I write this is I'll ask the seller, what part of your home would you want to make sure that the buyer knows most about? And what happens is they'll give me they'll tell me the things they want. I'll write it in there, and then they'll say, yes, that looks good, or no, that doesn't look good, which makes it easier for me to do that. If I just go in and write it myself, typically the seller will come back and say, well, you didn't say anything about this, or you didn't say anything about this, and then I have to rewrite it anyway. So for me, I just say, what are the most important things you want me to tell? And then I write it there. Now, the MLS gives you a certain amount, like 522 characters or something like that. I highly suggest you don't write that many, because what happens is once you get past maybe 150 characters or 200 characters, I can't remember what the number is, it pushes your MLS to 2 pages.
Oh.
If you can
Oh,
keep it on
yeah.
1 page, everyone's happier.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wouldn't write a whole thing right there, but you can write whatever you want. Agent remarks, this is, the agent is the only one that's going to see this. So if they pull it up on their MLS, they're the only ones going to see it. This is where I would put things like must have an appointment. There's an alarm on the property, call for the code. Buyer, so in this section, I might say seller.
Don't kick the dog.
Don't kick the dog. Yes. Don't kick the
So
dog would
that's
be
just for
great.
the other agent.
That's for the other agent. So these are things like where you put on there, you say, my seller wants to lease back for 30 days if possible. You know, this is where you're going to kind of give some of those details so that the buyer's agent can read it and be like, oh, okay, I know what I need to do to get that. Directions, non-standard address. That's really only important if you can't find it on Google. Most homes you can find, but there is some unique places where, like, let's say you have a cabin property or something, you can describe where to get there in that section. Exclusion remarks. This is where you define more in detail of what you're excluding. Like I said, if you're really going to exclude something, try to get rid of it before. Like a hot tub, you're probably not going to move it out of the way, but here you'd write, I want to remove a hot tub. And then the HOA remarks, this is one where it would save you a ton of time on the phone if you just call up the HOA first and get all the things included and write them right there. Because then agents don't need to call you and say, you know, what does the HOA cover? They can look right in the HOA marks and say, it covers all of this. And then we're good. Okay. Any questions on the MLS input form? Okay, seller's property disclosures. So we're going to kind of fly through these now because they're not, there's not a lot that we have to look at on this one, but I want you to look at the first part of this section, the notice from the company and the instructions to the seller. These are the 2 biggest things right in the middle of the notice to the company in the bold letters. Remember, we put bold because we had a problem and we want to disclose it. So right in the middle, it says buyer is advised not to rely on the company or any other agents of the company for determination regarding the physical or legal condition of this property. So this is a notice from us to the buyer and to the seller. We're just saying, don't rely on this, don't rely on us, don't rely on the MLS for your information. Instructions to the seller. The first part here, seller is obligated under law, regardless of occupancy, to disclose to the buyer defects in the property and the facts known to the seller that materially and adversely affect the use and value of the property that cannot be discovered by a reasonable inspection by an ordinary prudent buyer. Okay, so this is just saying we're wanting them to disclose. The biggest thing with disclosing, this is how I present it to all of my sellers. I say this form right here is the form that you will get yourself out of jail if you do it rightly, you do it right. Okay, this is how we as sellers can get in trouble, is this form right here, because we're selling the house as is, which means the home is as is, whatever condition it is, it's as is. However, we are required to disclose something, okay? And this is what it is. So if a seller says to me, should I disclose? If any statement starts with should I disclose, my
Yes.
answer is yes.
Don't tell me,
Yeah.
just disclose
Just
it.
disclose it, because the reality is, if you're going to ask me, we should disclose it. And we shouldn't be worried about whether the buyer is going to be okay with it or not. If you have a question on whether you're disclosing or not, you put it on here and describe it. And we'll go through every question you need to do. And we wanted anything we know that's wrong with the property, this is what we want to describe, because if the buyer goes through and they buy the property, and then afterwards they find something wrong, which they always will, they find something wrong, and then it comes back that the seller was hiding that, that can be a problem for the seller. Okay, so let me give you an example that we had. An agent or a seller discloses on there and they say there's no problem, there was no leaks, the roof never leaked, it had no problem. The buyer comes back and they say, we have a problem, the roof has been leaking, there's black mold in the roof, and you guys knew about this before you signed it. And they said, we didn't know about it, we have no idea about it. So then they go up into the attic and they find Home Depot buckets
Oh.
under the sections where they were leaking. So did the seller know about it?
I mean, I'd say yes.
They probably did. And in that particular case, that was a hard one for them to fight because you've got a problem in the attic that we didn't disclose. So it's always best to disclose. It's always best to just,
So did they have
to
to
do
pay
it.
for the new roof? Or-
it was, I never saw the end of it. I just know that that one did not just say, sorry, good luck with that. That one was going into a litigation to make them pay for it. And
Yeah.
whether they won or not, my guess is they probably are going to have some liability for it, because it's hard to say I didn't know when I have Home Depot buckets in my roof catching the water.
It's like, oops, I should have gone.
So that's the biggest thing. I have seen a lot where the sellers come back and said, oh, I forgot to disclose that. Okay, there's things like, I mean, you've lived in the home for 15 years.
Yeah.
And you forget that you're disclosing something. And in the transaction, you're like, oh, I remember that I need to disclose this. That's what this last form on this sheet is. It's the seller's property condition disclosure. It's like an addendum to this. So you'll see this down here. This is where you're gonna re-disclose. Like, oh, I remember this now. Let's disclose that. So there's a ton of questions. And then the last one is this one right here. Okay, seller's property disclosure. So you're gonna disclose those. Did you have a question?
If
Yep.
there was a homicide or anything of that nature, I know it's not on this seller's disclosure. Do you
Mhm.
have to disclose that?
So
Do you
there is
have
a-
Questions or?
So there is a stigmatized property, though anything that's under the stigmatisms doesn't necessarily need to be disclosed. It's not, that's not a, as a state law, those are not necessarily, you don't need to disclose those. Yeah, but
If they
But
ask.
don't you need to disclose if you ask, if they ask specifically?
yes, if it's asked specifically, yes, then you need to disclose that,
verbally
yes.
disclose it, but Not in writing.
Yeah.
Verbally is okay.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're protecting yourself, you want it in writing, so, but yes, yeah. So if it's a specific question about something and you know about it, then yes. I had a client who was a buyer and they bought a property and they found out, and I had no idea because I didn't ask about what happened, but they were mad at me because the previous owner had a heart attack in the house, and the previous owner's name was the exact same name as my buyer's husband, and she was not happy that I didn't know that. So it's not on here as an agent. I wouldn't necessarily go around and be asking a whole bunch of questions, but if your client wants to know, then do that. Okay. The biggest question I get from the seller's disclosures is that my seller has never lived in the property. So they have no clue on what this condition is. So do I need to fill out a seller's disclosures? Yes, that's the right answer. Okay. Yes, we have to fill out a seller's disclosures. What this is saying, and this is the part that gets confused by some agents, is all it's saying is, what do you know about the property? So if they never lived in it, most of these are going to be, I don't know any of it, but we're still disclosing that. They got away from the allowing no seller's disclosures because some house flippers were coming in and said, I never lived in the house, so there's no disclosures. Well, I'm sorry, but you tore every house or every wall out in this house. You know more about this house than probably the previous owner.
Yeah.
You need to disclose that. So yes, regardless of whether they've lived in it, whether they're in Indiana and they're selling their father's home that passed away here and they'd never even seen the home. They still need to do a seller's property disclosure, and they just disclose what they know. And what I tell my clients is, if you know, disclose it. If you think and you have no evidence of what's there, there's no need to be disclosing things you don't know, because it's all it's asking is, are you aware of, do you know this? And it's not, do you assume this or do you that? So I always just say, if you know it, disclose it. Okay, any questions on the seller's property disclosure? Yeah, I think we have just 2 more. Okay, wire fraud disclosure. Unfortunately, this is a big scam that's going on right now where we're getting ready to go to title company and our buyers or our sellers get wiring instructions and large amount of money goes to the wire. What's happening is these scammers are now getting a hold of the wiring instructions. They're sending them to your client with your email, with all of your information. So it looks like it's coming from you and says, hey, these wiring instructions just got changed. So send it here. And it looks like it came from you. It looks like it came from the title company. It looks like it came from the company. It's really legitimate. Like, it looks official. And what's happened is people are wiring their money. Well, when it wires, what happens when money gets wired?
It's gone.
It's gone,
You
right?
forget about it.
Okay. So we think that this is more common and people are known, but we've had in this office 2 months ago, an attorney client start to wire like $50,000 to the wrong wire. We
Oh,
wired it, but it hadn't got approved yet, and
oh.
title was able to stop it and save the money. But if it would have been 5 more minutes or 10 more minutes,
Oh.
$50,000 gone. And they can't do anything about it. So this form, this wire disclosure, is basically something that, like, don't take lightly. Disclose to your client. And this is how I present it to my client. You're going to get wiring instructions one time. If it changes at all, you get any email that changes it, do not change it. Call me. Let's talk to title. We'll be on the phone. We'll know what the change is. They don't change. So if there's something that comes in that changes, don't do anything. Let's talk about it. It's an actual conversation. It's not a text message. It's a conversation. That's how I always tell my clients, especially right when we get up to closing, because that week before closing, these scammers are watching social media. They're watching all of these things saying, okay, they're ready to close. Now it's time to send the official documents of, here's your wiring instructions.
How do wire instructions normally come? Written, like,
Yeah.
this is what we will do at this time.
Yeah. We're going to send it to you. Title will email them to you, but when I suggest, if you get a title email right at the start where we know it's coming, and then once it comes, we get on the phone and we verify these are the numbers, these are the things. So
And
one more step towards protecting them. But I've heard of cases where over $200,000 was gone. Think about it. A buyer's putting money down to buy a
breaks your
home.
heart.
They lose all of their money, and everyone's like, can't buy the home now.
That just breaks your heart. You just would die for your fire.
Yep. Okay, affiliate business one, this one we get a lot of questions in the company. Okay, so Century 21, Everest, we own, we don't own, we have ownership in mortgage, so in Spiro, and we have ownership in title with North Star. Because of that, we have to disclose that if somebody uses those services, Century 21, the main Century 21 might benefit from that. So because there's a benefit from there, regardless of whether they use those services, we have to disclose that there is a company related to that they could make money. So it says right here in the middle, it says you are not required to use the listed providers as a condition for your settlement or your loan on a purchase, sell, or refinance of the subject property. You are free to shop around. All we're doing is disclosing that these are available. Obviously we want you to use these people for, they help us and they help you guys, and they're really good services. But if you have somebody you have an association with, just because they're having a loan somewhere else, because we're with Century 21, we still have to do this disclosure. Okay? Any questions on the wire instructions or affiliate business? Okay, last one, and then we're done. And if you're online, put your name back in the box if you're still here. So you get credit for it. Just put it in the chat box. Okay, so now we're talking about the lead-based paint. So any property that was built prior to 1978, we have to do a disclosure that there might be lead-based paint in their home. That doesn't mean there is. That doesn't mean that there's not. It's just we have to do this disclosure. So if you look at section 1, that's the disclosure that there's health risks involved with it. You know, I mean, obviously, I wouldn't suggest eating paint chips from lead-based paint, but that's some health risks with it. Number 2, sellers disclose you're an acknowledgement. So basically, if you look at number A, there is known, or B, or A1 or A2. 2 is there's no known lead-based paint hazards in the property. And number 1 is there is known property. So that's an initial. I know on the paper it has a check mark there, but it's actually an initial. They're going to initial which one it is. Then B, records and reports available to the seller. So if there is reports that they've done, then that's where you're going to sign that you have it. Otherwise, you're going to sign B2, which is seller has no reports. So really the seller is that first section. They're just describing, it's super easy. Do you know of any lead-based paint in your house? Do you have any information regarding the lead-based paint in your house? If the answer is no to both of those, then you're fine. You're disclosing that you have no idea. So that's another thing. You're not assuming. So unless you've gone through and tested and know for sure that you have lead-based paint in there, you know, I mean, the chances are high if it's built before 1978, because that's what they use. But 1978, you probably have 15 coats on it after that anyway. So, you know, who knows? Then this gets sent to the buyer. The buyer has to do these 4 things. A, receive a copy of the information listed in above. So if you have the information, you send it to them. B, receive a pamphlet for protecting your family from lead-based paint. That's in dot loop. So all you have to do is go in dot loop and do pamphlet protecting your family. You can click on that and send it to your clients, so they have it. C, buyer has read the lead-based statement on section 1, so they have to read section 1 up there, so they recognize that. And then the big thing is D. If they sign I, the first one, a 10-day opportunity, then you have to include an addendum to your contract. They want to do an inspection on this lead-based paint. If they don't care to do the inspection, you don't need the addendum. You can sign number 2 that just says, I waive that opportunity to do the assessment. So those are the buyer's choices on that. Now remember, you have to submit this to the buyer before they can do it. So what I would suggest is have your seller sign this, attach it to your MLS, so that whoever puts an offer in could just print it off, sign it, and send it with their offer. And then number 4, agent acknowledges this is a seller's obligation. So as a seller, we need to give them the obligation of what they're responsible for. And then everybody signs it that they received it. Okay, that is all of the seller's forms that we went through. Any questions on any of the things we talked about? Okay, look, right at 12. Awesome. Okay, any questions online? Are you guys good?
Yeah, just one quick question. With the lead-based paint, if you know the home was built like, let's say 1985, I can ignore this whole form, correct?
Correct. If your home is built after
After 78.
78, you do not have to do this form at all.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, any other questions? Awesome. Oh, and make sure if you're in here,
It's right here.
sign that form so you can get credit. Thanks everyone online.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.